Alright guys, welcome back. Today in this video we're going to continue factoring trinomials, and this time we're going to talk about what happens when that last number is a negative. And it's a really easy fix, nothing complicated, a lot of review from last time, but just want to make sure you know how to see both cases. Okay, so let me give you some examples. When the last number is negative, we're still going to do the exact same thing we did before. Let's still just write out factors of 21. So that would be 1 times 21 and 3 times 7, and that's it. But keep in mind that this was actually a negative 21. And how do you multiply to get a negative number? Well, one of these has to be negative, right? Like in 3 times 7, you could do 3 times negative 7 or negative 3 times 7. Only one of them can be negative. If they're both negative, then that's just going to multiply together to be a positive. So when we write out this list, just keep in mind that this is the correct list. It's just that one of these numbers in each set is actually a negative number. And we don't know which one it's going to be until we look and see what we have to add it up to get to. So in this example, we have to add to get positive 4. Well, I definitely cannot get that using the numbers 1 and 21, so that's going to be out for an option. So let's look at 3 and 7. Am I going to do 7 minus 3, or am I going to do 3 minus 7? Which one will get me positive 4? And the answer is 7 minus 3 gets me positive 4. So what was negative there? Was it the 3 or was it the 7? Well, it was the 3 because we did positive 7 minus 3. So when I go to write my factors, I just have to make sure I put the negative on the 3. So I'll write it like this: x minus 3, x plus 7. And let's double check. Negative 3 times 7, is that negative 21? Yes. Negative 3 plus 7, does that add to get you positive 4? Yes. So I know I've put the negative in the correct spot. If I had put the negative over here, it would add to get me negative 4, which is wrong. Okay, and let's check our answer here. Remember, we can always check our work with factoring. That's the really cool thing about factoring, is you always know if you got it correct or not by just multiplying it back out. So let's take my first term, x, and multiply it to both things. That would give me x squared plus 7x. And now let's take the second one, negative 3, and multiply that to both things. That gives me negative 3x minus 21. Then combine together any like terms. The only like terms are these middle ones. And when I put that together, 7 minus 3, I get 4. And does that match the original problem up here? Yes, it does. So I know I have the right answer. So my final answer is this line right here, which I know has gotten messy, so I'll erase and write nice and neat. It was x minus 3 and x plus 7. So nothing crazy different when you have a negative. You just have to know that one of your numbers in the binomials will end up being negative. Okay, let's do some more examples. So this one, we have that the last one's positive, but b is negative. Again, no big deal. Let's first just write out our factors of 12, and this is positive 12. So it's 1 times 12, 2 times 6, or 3 times 4. Since this was a positive number, all of these numbers in here have to all be positive or all be negative. You can't have one be negative and one be positive. Okay, so what combination would get me to negative 8? Well, let's see. 1 and 12, if you add those together, would be 13. But what if it was negative 1 and negative 12? Well, that would just give me negative 13, so that doesn't work. How about 2 and 6? Let's try the next one. Well, 2 plus 6 is positive 8, so that doesn't work. But what if they were both negative? How about negative 2 plus negative 6? Well, that would be negative 8, and that works. So let's write that out. X minus 2, x minus 6. And let's just do a check. Is negative 2 times negative 6 a positive 12? Yes, because a negative, I'll write it at the top, a negative times a negative is a positive. And what about if you add them? Is negative 6 plus negative 2, does that equal negative 8? Yes, it does. So I know that I've chosen the correct factors. Remember, we could always check this by multiplying it back out. Okay, let's do the next one. Pause it here if you need to look at that work, because I'm going to clear the page. Okay, so next one. My number is negative 3. Let's just write out the number 3 write factors of it, and we know that one of the numbers has to be a negative. Well, the only factors of 3 is 1 times 3. But remember, one of these numbers, either the 1 or the 3, is actually going to be negative. And we will make whichever one is negative depending on what this number is. So this number over here is negative 2. How can I get negative 2? Do I do 1 minus 3 or do I do 3 minus 1? Well, 3 minus 1 is 2, so that's not it. But 1 minus 3, that is negative 2, which means I want to make the 1 positive and the 3 negative. So let's write that out. The 1 positive and the 3 negative. Okay, and then again we can check, is positive 1 times negative 3, negative 3. So is 1 times negative 3, negative 3? Yes. How about when you add them? How about 1 plus negative 3? Does that give you negative 2, like the second term is? Yes, it does. So I know I have the correct factors. All right, pause it here if you need to look at that, and move on when you're ready. Okay, so let's do some examples. Let's write out the factors of negative 16 over here to the side. And actually, I'll just write it as 16 and know that one of the numbers has to be negative. So that's 1 times 16, 2 times 8, or 4 times 4. Remember, one of the numbers has to be negative. Okay, so I'm going to pick which of these 3 options is correct based on whichever one will add to get me to positive 6. All right, well, will 1 and 16 ever get to 6 if I add them? No. And remember, one of them's negative, so you need to be thinking 16 minus 1, that's 15, and 1 minus 16 is negative 15, so that doesn't work. How about the next one, 2 times 8? Well, remember, one of them has to be negative, so if the 2 is negative, then 8 minus 2, that does give me 6, so that's going to work. So I need to have a positive 8 and a negative 2. So I'll write that out with a positive 8 and a negative 2. And the reason that works is because positive 8 times negative 2 is negative 16 when you multiply them. And when you add them, you get 6. So those are the correct choices. Okay, how about the next one? What are factors of 40? Well, I could do 40 times 1. I could do 20 times 2. I could do 4 times 10. I could do 5 times 8. And that's it. Now, this was a positive 40, so I need to think that all the numbers in this list are either both positive or both negative, but not 1 and 1. So now let's go through and see which ones will add to get me 30. 40 plus 1? No. What about negative 40 minus 1? What if they were both negative? Well, then that'd just be negative 41, so still doesn't work. How about 20 and 2? If I add them, I get 22. If they're both negative, I get negative 22, so that doesn't work. 4 and 10? If you add them, you get 14. If they're both negative, you would get negative 14, so that doesn't work. How about 5 and 8? Well, 5 plus 8 is 13, so that'll work. And they're both positive because I was dealing with a positive 40. So let's write that down. Y plus 5, and then y plus 8. Again, it doesn't matter. If you had written the y plus 8 one first, it doesn't matter. That's still correct. Okay, let's do the last one on the top row. I need to come up with factors of 30, but it's actually negative 30. So just keep in mind that one of the numbers has to be negative. So 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, and 5 times 6. Which of those factors add to get me, what is that number there? What's the coefficient? Well, it's technically a negative 1. So which ones will add to get me a negative 1? Well, what I'm looking at is probably this one down here, 5 and 6. If I do 5 minus 6, that gives me negative 1. So I know I want to do a positive 5, because this is a positive right here, and a negative 6. And that will add to get me negative 1. So I'll write it as n plus 5 and n minus 6. I had to make the 6 negative because I had to add to get me to negative 1. So that's why I wrote it like that. Again, if you flip-flopped the order that you wrote these binomials, it wouldn't matter. Okay, I want you to pause the screen here and work on this one down here. This will be the first one that we start doing on your own. And I want you to write out factors of 72. I know that it says negative 72, so just keep in mind that one of the numbers in each of your factors has to be negative. So pause the screen and write out factors of 72 and circle the ones that can add to get you to negative 14. Alright, so you should have a pretty big list for factors of 72, and let's go through and knock out the ones that will never, in any combination, will never add to get me to negative 14. So 1 times 72, no way can that ever add to get you to negative 14, even if one of them was negative. 2 and 36, if you added them with one of them being negative, you would either get 34 or negative 34. 3 and 24, if you added them with one of them being negative, you would either get to 21 or negative 21. How about 4 and 18? If you added them with one of them negative, it would work if the 4 was negative. If you did 18 plus negative 4, or another way of saying that is just 18 minus 4. So that must be your answer. So let's do a negative 4 and a positive 18. So we'd write it out like this, with the 4 having the negative sign and the 18 having the positive sign. And that's it. That's your final answer. Alright, next one, let's do kind of the same thing. I'm going to have you pause and write out some factors of 48, and then hit play when you're ready to talk about which ones can add to get me to negative 16, that middle term. So pause the video here. Alright, so here's my factors of 48, and this was a positive 48. So everything in that list, either both numbers are going to be positive or both numbers are going to be negative, because that's the only way you can multiply to get a positive. Positive times a positive is a positive, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So what combination could add to get me to negative 16? Well, 1 plus 48 is 49, so that definitely won't work. If they were both negative, it would just be negative 49, and that still is not going to get me anywhere close to negative 16. 2 plus 24 is 26. If they're both negative, it'd be negative 26, so that would not work. 3 and 16 adds to get you 19. If they're both negative, you would just get negative 19. 4 and 12, if you add them together, you get 16. But if they're both negative, you would get negative 16, so that's perfect. So we want to use these two, but make sure they're both negative. So I'll do W minus 4 and W minus 12. And that will be my final answer. Okay, and last one, let's go ahead and write out factors of 42. I'm going to erase a little bit up here so I can use some of this space. So factors of 42, I could do 1 times 42. I could do 2 times 21. I could do 3 times 14. And if you're not sure of these factors, I literally take out a calculator and do like 42 divided by 2, hit enter, and that's how I got this one. 42 divided by 3, hit enter, and I got 14. If you got a decimal, then you know just to move on, because that means that number is not a factor. Okay, so next one I would check on my calculator is 42 divided by 4. You'd see that you get a decimal, so you know to move on. So try 42 divided by 5. I already know that one's not going to work. And then you could do 42 divided by 6, which hopefully you know that that is 7. And that's all my factors. You could try several more, and you would just keep getting decimals. Okay, so now I have to pick out in this list which ones will add to get me to 13. Well, 1 plus 42 is definitely not going to get me 13. Same with 2 and 14. 2 and 21, I mean. 3 and 14, if you add those together, you get 17. If they were both negative, you would get negative 17, so that doesn't work. How about 6 and 7? If you add those together, you do get 13. So 6 and 7 is the factors I'm going to use, and they both have to be positive. So k plus 6 and k plus 7. And that's it. Remember, this hint down here, you can always check your answer by multiplying this back out and just verifying that you got the original problem we started with. So that's the nice thing about all these problems, is you never have to worry about if your answer is correct. You can always check by multiplying. Alright, that's it for this week, you guys. Factoring is a really important skill to have as you move on. So this is going to be something that you need to get a lot of practice with and get good at by the end of the week. And feel free to ask any questions any of the days. Just reach out by email and I'll help you out.